Avengers! Assemble.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a special episode of Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast. I'm your director, Christian Buckley, here today talking about the season finale, and honestly the whole thing, Loki, Season 1. Joining me is the Apex legend, Jack Martin. How are you, sir?
Excelsior, Christian. I'm doing very well. I'm very excited to talk about this, and it feels very similar to the old first run of Excelsior we did back when it was more just a Marvel/MCU podcast. So this it feels good to be back in this sort of regard.
Absolutely. You know, I considered throwing out the idea of doing a one-off for Black Widow, but I think the revelations and new story stuff and implications for the greater MCU, leaving this episode of Loki is much more warranting its own discussion than I think Black Widow did. So we will talk about Black Widow on this week's normal episode of Excelsior, releasing on Saturday. I believe that will be the 17th. But today, you're getting Loki and Loki only, as he deserves. So
Hot off the presses, too.
Yeah, for sure. I finished watching about 2 hours ago. I know you just did a rewatch, so it's very fresh in the mind. These are the hottest, piping hot cross bun takes right now. Mm-hmm. So, I guess starting things off, there will be spoilers in this episode for those who just saw this pop up in your feed and you're like, what the hell is this? There will be spoilers, but first off, Jack, general impressions on the finale and I guess the show as a whole. What did you think of Loki?
So on both accounts, I was so pleasantly surprised by the show and the finale. I didn't have too many expectations going into the show itself. I was expecting a smaller, contained sort of series akin to the little ones we got with WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and I feel like that the show excelled on that aspect. But man, I was going into this finale in particular with very low expectations, considering that the final episodes of WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier were either okay or kind of outright not good. And I was just blown away by this finale. I thought it was amazing. I think it's the best Disney Plus finale for MCU. It's probably right up there with the Mandalorian Season 2 finale, in my opinion. Yeah, I thought the tension throughout this episode was well established, and it carried from minute 0 to minute 46. And yeah, I don't feel like there was a lot of wasted time with this episode, and it wraps up the series as a whole in such a beautifully crazy way. So I loved it. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you for pretty much all of that. I thought it was a great finale. I thought, like, we did learn officially today that Loki is in fact getting a season 2. That's straight from the mouse's mouth. We know that absolutely now. And I think that's funny that Loki's story as a show is not done the way WandaVision's story as a show is complete and self-contained, the way that Falcon and the Winter Soldier is complete and self-contained in terms of being a show, right? Those stories will continue in films. Loki is very much not done, but it felt like it had such a stronger ending than both of those shows. And with my only low point of this season being last week's episode, I feel real strong about what they did with Loki and the future of this show and this character in the MCU. And I feel that way about a lot of characters in this episode, I believe. So, yeah, why don't we open up the floodgates? You had your spoiler-free impressions. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch it, come back, hear our takes, share your takes. But, man, out the gate, they got me. They really did. They got me. We were both a little doubtful that they do Kang, right?
Oh, yeah.
Last episode
was fully not expecting that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they kind of did Kang, but they kind of didn't, and I really, really love that. So we get to this mansion, right, this castle on this asteroid at the end of time, and we're greeted by Miss Minutes. And I'm sure you saw this, but there was a theory that Miss Minutes was the one behind everything.
I did see that. I when she popped up, I was like, no way, because I thought that theory was ridiculous. But, dude, it seems like everyone was right except for us, Christian.
I know.
Because
And
if you argue that Miss Minutes was behind it, like in a way, she kind of knew more than she let on. And if you
yeah.
thought Kang was there, well, there you go. So I just think it's really funny.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, I think we're also not wrong because technically it wasn't Kang, you know.
Yeah, no. It's
So
well, yeah, we'll get into it.
so yeah, the episode it got me. I was like, they said He Who Remains at first, and I was like, oh, I heard that theory as well, and they're just a random character, and people thought, oh, He Who Remains could just be a variant of Loki, the way we thought it was gonna be. But then the elevator opens once they get through this castle, and then you see Jonathan Majors, and I was like, fuck, they're actually doing this right now. Oh my god, I did like. Did you get thrown off when you saw him? Because like that was a big what the hell moment for me.
My immediate reaction was, wow, they actually did it. They actually
Yeah.
did. And I texted you this, and it wasn't in reference to Kang. We'll talk about what the other one is, but I really just was blown away. I know there were some breadcrumbs leading up to it. I know Eliath was associated with Kang in the comics, and people were really going on that train and sort of taking that to the Kang station, and choo choo, it arrived. So
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
So from there, the episode splits off into two main threads. I think one is very dominant, and that is Loki, Sylvie, and the Kang variant in Kang's castle, and the other being Mobius at the TVA, Hunter B-15, and Judge Renslayer. So, do you want to talk about the Renslayer side first? Because I feel like there's less to say there.
Yeah, there's much less to say there. We can start there.
So yeah, Mobius's whole thing this episode, after he left the Void last week, he said he was going back to the TVA to start a revolution. Clearly, him and B-15 are at the head of this whole thing. We see the reveal, the payoff for the pen. Not Mobius's history, but Ravana's. So B-15 shows some other hunters that Renslayer is actually a principal at a high school.
In Ohio in 2018.
Yeah. Did you like that reveal?
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, we knew that everyone was a variant. I think that was a really good payoff for a pen. You know, like that makes so much sense now that you think about it. Of course, the high school she was the principal for, or whatever she was. That was what the pen said on it. So, yeah, I thought that was really great, and it kind of sets up. I don't know where we're gonna go now with the multiverse involved, but it sets up that Hunter B-15 and Mobius were starting the TVA revolution of tuning in all the people who worked at the TVA to be like, hey, this is not exactly what you think it is.
Yeah, and I think for what it's worth in this episode, that's some very interesting season 2 seeds, right? Like, very much, I think the focus of season 2, when we get that first episode, will probably be picking up with the TVA. I don't think it's going to be checking in on Sylvie or the end of time. The end of time. I think we'll get to that point for sure, but I do think everything with the TVA for season 2 is where we'll jump back in, sort of the way we did with season 1. So that's my expectation right now.
Right. I think the Judge Renslayer bit is probably the weakest through line through the show, because they try to tee up stuff with her character in terms of her knowing more than there actually is, and even finding out that people are variants. It seems like she already knew that and is still dedicated to the cause, unlike Mobius, who hasn't even seen his past life. He just hears what other people have to say and believes them. And she's the only one that stays like true to it. So she's an interesting character, but I don't have a sense of really why she's doing that yet. I feel like that's a little unfounded as of now. Obviously, that'll be a season 2 thing, but at least at this point, I'm somewhat interested in her character, but I just don't have all the information I need to really like say she's one of my favorites.
Sure. I know we had this conversation I think around episode 2, right, about the TVA blind faith and maybe criticism of religion from the way they're telling their story. And I think after this finale hits, obviously when you talk about predestination, there's things that Kang is saying and all that kind of thing that could feed into that. But I think for me, it specifically stood out with Judge Renslayer basically saying like it can't be for nothing. I have to believe that there's a meaning to this, sort of the way that you see like I don't know devout Catholics be like, oh, I mean, I gotta be a good person so that way I don't go to hell. Like it really did to me hit on that. Hey, this is maybe not the focus of the show like we thought it could have been, but that thread of the TVA, the belief in the timekeepers, the belief in a greater power is sort of a critique on religion, and Renslayer with that blind faith is where that thread ended up. And it was not as big of a focus that I wanted it to be, but I did think it was interesting seeing her sort of wrap that all up when she walked off of this episode.
Right. I do like the idea of her being in denial. I was slightly
Yeah.
confused by her saying she's in search of free will, because it seems like the TVA is the antithesis of that, and she stands for the TVA. So a little confused by that. I think it's kind of supposed to be confusing, and we don't really know what she's up to, and that's more of a season 2 thing. But
Sure.
yeah, she has the seeds of potential for being a really interesting character in the you know in the time to come.
Yeah. I'll say this too. Like when she said "in search of free will," I thought she was talking about. Well, I guess we're just gonna keep calling him Kang, Jonathan Majors' character in this episode. I thought she was talking about him because I think when Miss Minutes is there, she says something like, "Oh, he wants you to have this file. Like he wants you to see this. This is more helpful." And she's kind of clueless. She's like, "Who are you talking about?" And then when Mobius comes into her office, she says something to the effect of like, only one person can have free will. And I think that file was probably like his character maybe doing some security of like, hey, if things don't go the way I hope they do with the whole Loki Sylvie choice, maybe Renslayer can like step into what I'm abandoning my life's work.
Yeah,
That's
I
kind of
think
what I
I
took
think
it
you
as.
nailed it.
But
That's probably where that's going.
so very interesting. But yeah, definitely the shift was felt with her when she walked out. But I was into it. I think it's a good setup for a new season.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that being said, why don't we go over to the Loki side of things? Loki, Sylvie, and I've seen people refer to him as Immortus this episode. I've seen people refer to him as He Who Remains, just as he's introduced. But he is a variant of Kang the Conqueror, a variant of Nathaniel Richards, the scientist, great grandson, I think, of Reed Richards and Sue Storm. So, I guess as far as introductions go, what do you think of Jonathan Majors in the MCU?
I think it took me through my rewatch of the episode to really enjoy the performance of Jonathan Majors, because at first blush I couldn't really settle in on his acting, because it was kind of all over the place, which I guess makes sense because he's controlling the the sacred timeline, and he's a little out of his mind at this point. I think it's safe to say. But after the rewatch, I really liked how he sort of like delved into madness in a way. And I really love how he made both Lokis feel completely helpless, because anything that they do, they can't win. Either they take over for him and they have to do the dirty work of maintaining the sacred timeline and ensuring that the multiverse doesn't go out and spiral into madness, or kill him, and then that happens. And I love how he is just like the all-powerful being that he is, essentially. So his character as the villain, without even having to throw a punch, I think was done brilliantly.
Yeah, I fully agree. I was enthralled by his performance. I think part of the reason I wasn't looking forward to a Kang big bad reveal here, and the reason I feel like we still didn't get Kang, is because it I was expecting it to be Thanos 2.0 and just being like, oh, I believe I have a holy right to do this for the greater good of the universe. And like, it roots from a similar place, right? It stems that way, but I really love the direction they took with him because we'll see if this translates to Kang as well because this is a variant of the character we will be introduced to down the line. But I did I honestly I didn't really get a sense that this character was a true villain. I think he was just like, hey, this is the the scenario where there's going to be the least blood on somebody's hands, and I'm terrified of the other outcomes. And I think that terror comes across in how frantic he is and how scatterbrained he feels, which is so interesting because he knows everything and because he's in so much control of literally everything. I really thought it was like a brilliant portrayal of uh, a new character introduction, and it was not what I expected it to be when people were saying, "Oh, it has to be Kang." And I think that just gets me excited for the inevitable reveal of Kang too, because if there's this character who is all powerful in what we know so far, and he is so like fanatical and frantic, I think it puts a lot of pressure on the Kang reveal because I don't know if Kang is going to be as eccentric or if Kang is going to be more in line with Thanos. But I think when we do eventually meet Kang, I think the pressure is really on for him to be imposing and threatening because of how Jonathan Majors portrayed the variant of Kang here. So I thought it was a brilliant way to introduce your next big bad.
I don't think he will act remotely the same as he did in this episode whenever we see him next. Because you're right, this was a variant of Kang, and variants all act differently. And even if Kang looks similar, maybe, I know people are saying they might do the more traditional, like, purple or blue Kang. Even if he looks, like, kind of similar facial-wise, but has, like, I don't know, blue or purple with him, I think he'll probably be more like a menacing character, like what you said, like a Thanos. But I always think in the MCU, the villains that are the most impactful are the ones you can sort of sympathize with in a way, or appreciate what they're doing. And even though Kang, even though Kang started all this with reaching out through the multiverse and sort of starting all this madness, he's like trying to, calm it and make sure nothing spirals out of control. So in a way, it's like, oh well, I mean, his means are pretty awful, like enslaving people to, trim the timeline, but he's preventing utter chaos in the multiverse. So in a way, it's like, man, he's just this dastardly villain who seems like he's like kind of one or multiple steps ahead of everyone else, quite literally at some points. So I really enjoy that about his character.
Yeah, I do too. And as I'll say this, when we do eventually meet Kang, if he is not a carbon copy of Thanos, right? But like if he is really more of that stoic, I have a holy crusade, I think I'll be a little disappointed because the idea of a villain believing they're right but acting out and maybe doing the horrible things they're going to do out of fear, I think is way more interesting than Thanos, who is like, oh, it's my manifest destiny to do this upon the universe so everybody can continue to live, right? And maybe, I don't know when Kang is going to become the Thanos equivalent. Like, I don't know if that's 10 years from now or if that's in 2023. But if they do go the Thanos direction of, like, brooding, deep-voiced, menacing guy, the further we wait to see Kang again, the more I'll be okay with that. But, yeah, just the way it was introduced here and the way that we see the variant of himself be so afraid of that other version of himself makes me really excited to see him whenever we do get to see him. And I know we will see him for sure in Quantumania, so.
Yeah, and I just like how the tension built up through the episode even still leaves off with him saying, I'll see you later, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's terrified of the variants of himself. So I think we're in for something good. Slight spoilers for the Invincible comics. There's a character who is exactly like Kang the Conqueror, how Kang is portrayed in this episode, like someone who like discovers the multiverse and like communes with themselves and like sort of works with themselves for a purpose. And that's what I thought about during this episode. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I really did enjoy it a whole lot. So, I just, do you think that Kang is going to be Thanos level for the next decade, or do you think Kang is going to be this phase? Because I could see a world where Kang's whole being is dealt with by the time we get Fantastic Four, which I assume will be the equivalent of Avengers for this phase, and the way Loki was introduced in Thor and then was sort of wrapped up in Avengers. I could see Kang be introduced here and Ant-Man and then wrapped up in Fantastic Four at the end of Phase 4.
I'm leaning that way. I don't know if you tease the next Thanos so quickly and have him stay so long, especially to give him such a reveal. Like, we know a decent amount about this character in a way we really didn't about Thanos at the end of Avengers.
Yeah.
So I think maybe he's a Phase 4 villain, but the multiverse itself and the ramifications of that will last throughout this next phase. I'm starting to think that the multiverse won't be quickly dealt with in Phase 4. I think that's a few phase situation.
So the multiverse saga follows the Infinity Saga, you think?
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay. I can see that, yeah, and I think that makes sense, right? And similar to the Thanos introduction, I do think Kang will probably be dealt with by Fantastic Four, which really makes sense because, like, Kang, his legacy begins with the Fantastic Four, right? So, like, it just makes a lot of sense, I think, in my opinion, to take care of that there in a significant enough way. And then maybe Fantastic Four introduces that next 10-year villain. And we talked about that as a possibility on last week's episode. But exciting things for the future. I think it was a genius way to introduce your villain by introducing them but not really introducing them. And just being like, here's the taste. We'll see you in a couple of years.
Yeah.
I really like that a lot.
He's almost like a messenger for a bigger threat in himself later on.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping. I really like this a lot because I know in the past we talked about how they'd introduce Galactus, right? And you have to maybe have Silver Surfer show up and then just say, like, something's coming and you're never going to be ready for it. I got similar intent from the way they did Kang, the setup of Kang here with The One Who Remains. So I did think it was fantastic and a huge highlight of the episode, but I know you shouted out the tension they build in the episode, and that entire scene in his office really, I have to rewatch it, but I think that might be one of my favorite scenes in the whole MCU.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's the majority of the episode. It's like a good split up between like different cuts between that and Mobius and Renslayer. It's like a good 20 minutes or more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I made a TikTok about this, but it is mimicking my favorite scene in all of Star Wars of the throne room scene of Return of the Jedi. So that's my favorite type of villain conflict storytelling sort of thing, where there is a fight that's going on, but it's a very personal, intimate fight, and it is 90% dialogue and talking to get through whatever the conflict is. So, like, literally you have the two characters of Loki and Sylvie in the Luke and Vader position, who they should be on the same page, but they're not quite. And then you have the Emperor or Kang, The One Who Remains, just, like, laughing and being like, whatever happens, I'm good. And they have the window, too, of, like, just showing the impending doom. Like, I thought it was great. Like I said, favorite scene in Star Wars, love dialogue rather than flashy fighting, and I think that was integrated into the MCU very well with this scene.
It seems like now it's certain that they got rid of the big sort of boring boss fight before this episode in last week's episode, which is why that was probably my least favorite episode of the show.
Same.
Yeah, and I'm glad that sort of reversed. Like WandaVision had the penultimate episode being more dialogue focused and character focused, and the last episode was more action focused, and it was kind of the reverse for this particular episode. But I love how at the end of this episode, you still have smaller character moments for both Loki and Sylvie, and you still have the MCU building with giant multiverse and all the ramifications of that. But I just love how at the end of this episode at the end of the season rather, there was clear character growth for Loki, and he's almost punished for it in a way. And that's just the most Loki thing I could think of, where he's like trying to better himself and he is spurned for it, and that's amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's really ironic considering moments before he has that punishment for trying to better himself the way that he did this entire season, where there is somebody controlling everything. When that element's taken out, right, when the one who remains is killed and free will is unleashed across the multiverse, Loki still loses and like still falls into that self-pity and like, why did I trust anybody? Like, I'm really glad we got to stew on that, and I'm glad that in the final moments of this episode, like you're saying, there were character moments. And yeah, him being punished, that was a really good way to phrase it, I think, because like his heart is kind of broken because he trusted Sylvie and she betrayed him. He went to honestly look for his new best friend to find some comfort. He has no idea who the hell he is. So like, man, you brought it up, I think, earlier in the episode and before we were recording, but in terms of a show, this is how you do a season finale. Like, I think they wrapped up a ton of threads in a very satisfying way and left off on some amazing, like, low notes to just make you think until we get season 2. So I'm really glad it didn't just end on Sylvie murdering him, or something very bombastic, or the screen of the timeline just like spewing out into a million different things. I'm glad we got some character moments to leave off on.
Yeah, and like what you alluded to, like his arc is far from being complete. I've seen like some people mention not feeling fulfilled by the end of this because of Loki's character, but that's clearly purposeful because we will get that resolution eventually. But we're just leaving off in like the middle of his arc where he's clearly at the lowest. And it's interesting because I don't think we can really predict where he goes or how he grows or regresses, because it's very possible that he reflects on him trying to change and is just says, well, that didn't work, I'm just going to go back to the way I was, or I'm going to adopt a different persona, or however he wants to deal with that. So I thought that was a brilliant way to end the episode and the season overall, just to tee up what happens in season 2 being more of an unknown. And I'm also so glad, and I was not expecting this. I really thought the show was going to wrap itself up very nicely, and I was dreading that the multiverse wasn't really going to be a thing addressed in the show all that much. That clearly was not the case. I'm glad that the multiverse is actually meaningful in this, and I don't think I could have told you that Loki would have been as impactful, the show would have been as impactful as it was back in like January, because I think we're all expecting WandaVision to be the multiverse setup, that it wasn't. And I think this was equal parts character building and very personal, and also huge universe building. And I think they handled it well on both accounts, and I was totally surprised.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up too, because I know I'll see this at some point, but I truly believe that this show is more than just like a bridge between the Infinity Saga and what we're calling the Multiverse Saga. I really do think that this show, much like WandaVision and Falcon, is telling a meaningful story about a character that couldn't be done with another character or in another form. Like, using this show, using the idea of literally facing yourself of Loki against Sylvie, the other variants, like, to overcome yourself in a way that you just constantly have to look at how pathetic your existence can be, it makes Loki's story of like finding himself, finding who he really is, his struggle of his identity, I think really effective. And I think by the end of this season, yeah, I had questions at the end of the episode about what's up with Mobius, what's up with the multiverse, but I also was thinking about Loki as a character, right? Because after Sylvie kissed him, which I do think was just her using him, right? I don't think she is reciprocating anything there.
No, she literally spun him around so she could grab the temp pad.
Yes. So, like seeing when we cut back to Loki and he's just sitting there and he looks so broken, I thought to myself, I was like, what would happen if this Loki right now went to go see Thor? Like, how would their relationship be different right now? Like, those were questions I was asking myself, and I do want to see this Loki meet Thor again and see if anything can change with them. Like, that was a huge note that I had in my head when the episode was wrapping up, because I do think Loki's changed, and I do think he's gone through enough of a journey of discovery that I think seeing him with Thor, his brother, his rival, his friend, would be really interesting and different. So I do want to give the show credit for developing a character the way the other shows did, in addition to having a great impact on the future of the MCU.
Yeah, totally. And I really love how this show takes him on a roller coaster of an arc in a lot of ways. He starts at the bottom, being captured by the TVA, eventually rises with Mobius and Sylvie in the penultimate episode, just sort of, being close to each other and, developing their relationship and friendship. And then now being even further down than he was at the beginning of the series. And I love the uncertainty of his character and just the ramifications of the show in general. Like, what will the multiverse actually look like for the MCU? How will it be sorted out? And also, like, where does Loki even go from here? So yeah, the finale of this and the show in general just kind of reminds me of watching like Game of Thrones in high school and just getting left off at the end of one of those seasons, being like, where are we going next? I can't even imagine what's going to happen. And yeah, this show is amazing.
Yeah, I want to ask you this then, because we see after Loki has his moment to pick himself back up, he is going to look for Mobius in the TVA. There was the clock, right, with like all the different hands on it. That was new, and I think they made a deliberate focus on that thing, right? Like, did that stand out to you?
It did the second time.
Okay.
In the layout, I think of the room he was in was slightly different as well. I don't know if the couch was there in the TVA we knew, or there was a bunch of numbers and letters on the walls where he was that I don't think was the case. But yeah, the clock was definitely different. The hands on the clock we saw at the end were all black, and I think they were multicolored on the one we were familiar with.
Okay. Yeah, so it definitely stood out to me there, and I was like, that's weird. I don't remember anything like that before, but it's revealed Loki is in the library, the archives of the TVA. He sees B-15 and Mobius together. He tries to catch him up. Clearly he's distraught, like you said, struck with fear because of Kang. And I think this is maybe, again, we're talking about leaving off on a television show. This might be one of the best final exchanges I've seen in a season, where it's so exciting. You're like, okay, they're going to team up. They're going to work together. Next season, they're going to take on Kang. They're going to try and make the TVA a force for good. But Mobius is like, who are you? I that was like a jaw-dropping moment. I was like, no way, they're not doing this right now. But yep. Do you like that reveal? Do you think that's strong leading into a new season?
Oh, I think it's incredible. They essentially gave us the Planet of the Apes ending, in a way where at the end of that movie he looks at the Statue of Liberty and sort of changes our whole perspective of what was happening, in a way. But you just leave off with that note being like, oh man, I can't believe they did that. And another change here was Mobius, the one we knew throughout the whole show, had his tie sort of loosened in the episode a little bit before, and then this Mobius, it was all, buttoned up and his tie was all the way up. But yeah, just the ramifications of that. I love how just unclear and uncertain everything is by the end of this episode. I think that's a really strong way to leave off your season, because there's so many potentials for the next season of television, where I love the end of Mandalorian season 2. It is very definitive, and it's like very much kind of the inverse of where we find Loki at the end of season 2. It feels like a lot of arcs have closed at the end of Mandalorian season 2, and Loki, there's just so many possibilities, and I love them both, but I do love the tension and just the where do we even go from here vibes we get from Loki. So yeah, it's amazing finale. I feel like that's kind of the takeaway for a lot of people with this show, is just how crazy we leave off.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about that statue, right? Because that's the final shot of the show. We see Loki look out into the library after he's a little confused, trying to get his bearings, and he sees, rather than the 3 timekeeper statues, he sees one statue of someone who is most likely Kang the Conqueror. Mm-hmm. So Sylvie, maybe unintentionally, I think, sent Loki to whatever timeline where the variant of He Who Remains that scares He Who Remains, Kang the Conqueror. I think that's the timeline our Loki is in now. And my idea is that this TVA is maybe more militaristic. I think this might be a conquering invasion TVA rather than like a TVA that is meant to keep the balance for He Who Remains. I think in a similar fashion, variant slightly different, Kang the Conqueror built this army of, maybe they have a different abbreviation, but he makes this army of soldiers to help him invade other timelines. I think that is maybe where we're going. So this Mobius isn't our Mobius, but it is Kang the Conqueror's Mobius, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't have any theories for where we leave off, but that's a good idea. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, because I don't know. I feel like if we hang on Kang the Conqueror presumably being celebrated in the position the Timekeepers were at the TVA, I think inherently the Timekeepers were meant to be a peacekeeping being or force,
benevolent.
Where Kang the Conqueror, yes, benevolent, where Kang the Conqueror is very much like, I'm hungry. I want things, So like, yeah, I think that might be the direction we're going. Curious to see if our Loki has some tension with Mobius in season 2, where he might be a bit more in the sort of position that Judge Renslayer is in, but we'll have to wait and see. Very strong finale, though.
When do you think we get season 2? Do you think it's quick? Do you think it's a few years out? Because this is more like traditional TV.
Yeah.
I
would love if it was next year. But you know what? I'll say it's next year, because let's look ahead at what we got coming up, because I do think we can talk about this in a second, but we got Spider-Man, probably going to be influenced by this. Multiverse of Madness, definitely going to be influenced by this. And 2022, I don't know if there's much else, but we know Quantumania is February 2023, and that's where Kang is going to show up for the first time officially, been announced. I could see Loki season 2 be an actual bridging of a gap between season 1, Multiverse of Madness, and then Quantumania, where Kang shows up.
Yeah, I would hope that it's next year, because it just strikes me as being an actual like TV show that is on the production of a traditional TV show, where you do get like a season a year, and that would make sense, the timeline you laid out. And there's been so many like breaking news stories today about like the ramifications of this show, and one of them is that Loki is going to be in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So yeah, I feel like we're probably due for a season 2 of the show at some point between Multiverse and Ant-Man. So seems like that would be 2022.
Yeah, because like I don't imagine it would come out like January of 2023, leading right into Quantumania. So yeah, I think if you want to build up Kang, a natural way to do that would be seeing Loki in Kang's timeline and trying to survive it. I think that might be an interesting thread to follow because I don't know what his role is going to be in Multiverse of Madness. I don't know if is Owen Wilson going to be in Multiverse of Madness, or like is Doctor Strange going to come to this dimension to get Loki out of it? I don't know, but yeah, lots of exciting possibilities for the future. So speaking of that, do you think we get that Spider-Man trailer soon? Now that this is out.
That was my immediate thought, and Brandon Davis of comicbook.com tweeted that. Like, release the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer now, because it seems like that's probably maybe why we haven't gotten the trailer yet, because it seems like it's very tied in with the multiverse, and now Loki has officially really delved into the multiverse and sort of started this whole multiverse of madness situation. So it's possible. I feel like we could really use that trailer right about now. Like I said, if we get that trailer, it's coming out on a Monday. Marvel loves dropping stuff on Mondays. So maybe next Monday.
Yeah, because like I'm pretty sure that where we stand at the moment, they probably want to give at least until the weekend for people who maybe don't have time during their work week to watch it. But that tied in with what you said, I think makes a lot of sense that my eyes are on next Monday more attentively than they have been for any other week about Spider-Man. I think it's probably time. Black Widow's out there. I mean, well, Eternals is the next movie still, but they gotta at least start the marketing for Spider-Man. Um, so yeah, I think it's a safe bet. I think by not the next episode you hear, because that's the Black Widow and Avengers Saturday episode, but the episode after. Hopefully, I imagine by then we will have a Spider-Man trailer. And at this point, I think it is 100% Tobey Maguire's in that movie, man. Like, I think now more than ever, I can't even question it. I think it's absolutely going to happen.
Do you think the trailer shows those Spider-Men?
Yes.
I feel like
without a doubt.
I feel like you probably have to at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like people know.
People know. That's such a huge way to market that movie.
Oh God,
and
yeah.
I think especially now that the multiverse is like it's happening, 100% it's happening. That's how you showcase that. That's how you really be like, hey, it's a new era for Marvel right now. It's all about the multiverse. You know what that means? That means Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland are all on the same screen, all swinging through the city. I think that's what you have to do. That's your next movie that you're marketing, that you haven't started marketing yet, that begins marketing after the multiverse is opened up. I think you got to lean into that the same way they're going to lean into it for Doctor Strange, I'm sure.
Another tangent regarding Spider-Man. I really hope in that movie they include like the old, I think it was Danny Elfman theme from like the original Spider-Man. Yeah. Could you imagine? Like that would be or integrate like all of the Spider-Man themes somehow.
Yeah, man, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 theme is really good.
They gotta do it. But yeah, I really think dude, I just can't believe that Loki of all projects really like kickstarted this whole multiverse business. I just can't believe that. I did not expect that of this show.
Interesting observation that one Kayla Karloff made, right? So she said, and I didn't pick up on this, but I have to go back and watch it again, but she thinks that there's a connection to the moment where Wanda hears her children call out in the post-credit scene and Sylvie stabbing the one who remains and opening up the multiverse. So as soon as the multiverse became open and actually tangible, that's what triggered Wanda hearing her children.
That's a really good observation and theory. That is probably correct.
Yeah, I
Because,
think she nailed it.
yeah, because, like, that would just make sense because we don't know when that scene post WandaVision occurs.
Hmm.
Um, and we also don't know when, technically, Loki and Sylvie, or well, when Sylvie kills the King, the Conqueror variant. Um, so, yeah, I think that's a really good observation. It's probably true.
Yeah, so makes a lot of sense. We're leading on into everything for Multiverse of Madness. I think Wanda, Loki, Doctor Strange, all gonna have some interesting conversations, I'm sure. But
Oh, real quick.
mhm.
We've obviously talked a lot about the ending. I want to really quickly talk about the beginning of this episode
Oh, dude, yeah.
with all of the, like, some of the most iconic lines in the MCU during the intro with the, like, MCU crawl or whatever.
Hmm.
That was, like, at equal times, like, emotional and at equal times, like, very suspenseful, and something felt off about that in a way. And that was one of the more creative MCU intros we've seen, I think.
Yeah, I was eating a sesame seed bagel, and I was like, you know what? Here we go. Hit play. Took a big bite out of that bagel. Then I heard Cap's song, Cap and Peggy's song, and then I heard the Iron Man repulsor, and I was like, wait, what? And it took me a second because it was early in the morning. I had to pause it, and I finished my whole bagel. I was like, I can't be doing this at the same time. This is too much.
Can't be choking on them sesame seeds.
No, I definitely did. I was like, I can't be eating while I'm watching this episode. I'm not ready for what's about to happen.
Yeah, what a crazy way to just start and it, like, I feel like this whole episode and that intro itself just showed how impactful this show is. And it to me it kind of proved that Disney Plus shows, and not that I think many people really thought that, but I feel like it kind of proved that Disney Plus shows are as meaningful to the greater MCU as the movies are. And I don't, like I said, I don't think a lot of people really thought that, but the previous two shows and this show itself, in a way, were very personal and didn't have too many ramifications. But this just sort of blew that out of the water, being like, hey, those shows are as important, and we're going to pick up on threads from these shows in movies and whatever else we want to do. And that's very clear by the end of this episode.
So let me ask you this then: would you say that the influence and importance of Loki on the MCU, is it greater even than the most recent MCU film?
Then Black Widow.
Perhaps.
Yes. Most certainly is, Christian.
Interesting. So for those that were doubters, maybe
Yeah.
you might have to you might have to sub to this service if you want to be caught up to date.
I thought you were going to
Um,
go with more impactful than Avengers Endgame, because there is a
no.
case. There's a case.
Well, yeah, I could hear it.
There's a case to be made.
Yeah. I mean, very much so. Iron Man, that was the big takeaway. Iron Man is gone. His replacement, haven't really found him yet. Captain America, we got a new Cap. All's well that ends well. That was the big takeaway for Avengers Endgame, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's like, oh man, we're out of our depth right now in terms of our defenses against what's coming. So, yeah, I think you're right. There is a case. But with that being said, do you want to rank this amongst the shows and maybe do a preliminary ranking in the greater MCU?
I would love to.
Okay, let me hear your show ranking right now. How do the WandaVision, Falcon, and Loki stack up?
So, without having rewatched Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision, right now I would say number 3, being my least favorite, would be Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I still love, or like a lot at least. And then number 2, I would say, is Loki, and number 1 would be WandaVision, just because I felt so much emotion throughout WandaVision and wasn't really expecting that, and really made me love the character of Wanda and Vision, really. But I think when I'm talking objectively, this might be it. I feel like this is a much more focused show, but at least that would be my personal ranking. What about you?
Sure. So for me, I'll go 3, 2, 1. 3 would be Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Really solid show. Love Sam and Bucky. Um, really impressed with the themes they tackle in that show, but it was a bit messy because of COVID, right?
Oh yeah.
Second for me would be WandaVision, despite Wanda and Vision probably both being in my top 5 characters in the MCU. The further we get away from that show, the more I don't like slamming on the brakes. That is episode 3.
Yeah.
And the ending feels a bit. It's fine, but it's a bit messy. Loki, I think, is very much all killer, no filler. Episode 5 is a little weak, I think, but just such a great focus on developing this character the way the other 2 shows did, but also having a meaningful and I'd say lasting impact on the future of the greater MCU. So, very impressed with the show. Big fan of it. So, I know you have it ranked amongst the MCU though. So, do you want to give us a little taste?
I will say to your point of it being the best, I do agree objectively because I feel like it is the most consistent of the shows. Like, even compared to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I think had a good pace. But yeah, even I love WandaVision, and it's probably my personal favorite. But man, like what you said, it really does slam on the brakes at a few points in the show, and it kind of messes with the pacing. But yeah, yes. Let me pull up my ranking, which I updated. So right now I have Loki at. Do you want me to read the whole thing or just where it is right now?
Sure. Give me what it's around. Give me here the whole thing.
Okay, so it is at number 9. It is below Thor Ragnarok at number 10. I'll do my top 10. Thor Ragnarok's number 10. Loki's number 9. Black Panther's 8. Guardians of the Galaxy 1 is 7. Homecoming is 6. WandaVision is 5, which seems like it might be a little too high. We'll reevaluate. Winter Soldier's 4. Infinity War is 3. Endgame's 2. And Civil War is number 1.
Very nice. Yeah, currently, I think Loki will hang in my top 10. All I have left in my MCU rewatch is Ragnarok, Infinity War, and Endgame, and Far From Home. And I haven't ranked WandaVision or Falcon in here, but currently I have Loki slotted in with my timeline rewatch. So, again, I haven't watched probably 4 of my favorites right now, but currently Loki is in the top 5 based off what I've watched so far. So,
yeah, it's just this came at me like so unexpectedly, and it sounds like it might have done the same for you, and just totally blew by me. And I was expecting this to be like sort of middle of the road. But man, by the end of this season, I feel like it was such a solid season of TV. And that even surprised me. I thought this was just going to be like how Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision were just MCU projects cut up into 6 parts, but this really felt like a TV show. And this felt like the first like true TV show in a way. Where the other shows kind of felt like or what are they called? Like Band of Brothers is like a mini-series.
Mini-series, yeah.
Yeah, those kind of felt like mini-series where this feels and is a TV show. And it's just great. It's a great show.
I wholeheartedly agree. Were you let down with no post-credit scene?
Yeah, in a way I was. It feels like the first MCU project without like a proper post-credit scene. That's probably untrue.
I think Endgame didn't have one.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. So it felt weird, but honestly, in a way I'm glad because the weight of I didn't kind of want the weight of the last bit of the episode to be underscored by maybe a more silly scene at the end of it. So in a way it's good that we didn't get one. I am somewhat disappointed. What about you?
I was expecting Avengers 1, Thanos stands up, turns around, smile, sort of reveal for Kang. Like,
Mm.
maybe just like he realizes what happened and then he just like smiles and then we just get to see him and then maybe we get another post credits at the end of Doctor Strange that is more progressing what he's doing. Maybe we hear about him in Loki, and then when Kang is in Quantumania, that's sort of how Thanos was in Guardians 1. Like, that's kind of what I was expecting for his future appearances. So the fact that we didn't get a tease of him here, I think was probably the right call. You know, I bet they're still trying to figure out how they want to dress up Jonathan Majors. Honestly, I don't know if I'd want the blue or purple face paint at this point. I think it would just maybe be a little silly, but um, yeah, I'm excited to see whenever Kang pops up for sure.
Yeah, I think the potential of his character is really interesting. I love how he's just this super intelligent person that figured out the multiverse, and he's the one that started all this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, do you like how we had like Kang, the Kang variant was behind it all, or are you disappointed that it wasn't Loki, or do you sort of like how the show presented its case for how we ended up?
I thought it was very close to being a genius way to reveal your villain without really revealing your villain. Like, I don't know if I'm alone on that, but I do really think, I mean, the way we talked about it, this isn't Kang. This is someone who is probably going to act different from Kang. This is someone who has a different agenda than Kang, but it is still kind of Kang. So I'm not disappointed that it wasn't a Loki. I think there could have been some on the nose resolution of facing your inner demons that like is what I was expecting. I would have been interested in seeing that, but I'm aware that probably would have been very blunt in terms of the way they were telling their story. Um, so because we really already got Loki turning over a new leaf in the show, I don't mind that the big resolution was set up for the next big villain because it was a very creative way to do it, and I obviously I don't think they can do this again, but I do think introducing your villain by not introducing them is really smart and completely unexpected for me. That if you made me think of a list of ideas of how they would introduce Kang, his variant that isn't really like him, kind of, but is in the similar ballpark, would not be in the first 50 ideas I give you. So I
Yeah,
liked it a lot. I don't know how you feel.
I'm with you. I was actually thinking it would be a little bit more silly to have Kang show up in this, but I feel like the way they did it, and for him, like what you said, for him not to be the conqueror Kang, him being the more like we got to figure this out and end it Kang, um, more of the peacekeeper Kang in a sense. I thought that was really interesting, and now that I'm thinking about it, I think the show could have gone the route of Loki, a variant of Loki was behind this all, pruning the Lokis, and then Loki or Sylvie would have sacrificed themselves to, I don't know, somehow end the Conqueror Loki, and then one of them would take up the mantle of the TVA, and that would be the end of the season. I feel like that would have just been sort of a dull ending to this show, and this ending I adored because it just totally blew me by, and I did not expect this. And it also like I love how Sylvie and Loki just are clearly not on the same mindset at this point, and it is a clear division between their characters, and that's the best way to leave it off in between season 1 and 2. So yeah, this is. I was not disappointed that we didn't get the Loki. I think we were both expecting Loki to show up, and we didn't. So I'm glad in a way.
Yeah, I think they made the right call, and that's why they are the ones making the decisions here. You
Oh
know,
yeah, big time.
um, I'll say this too. Final note: seeing what they did here, and really, really, truly being impressed with the way they set up Kang. I have a bit less worry about No Way Home. I don't know how strong the correlation is, but just being impressed that they were able to surprise me with such a huge thing of introducing your next villain and setting up a multiverse. A little bit of the worry in my heart about No Way Home was deflated, just a bit. I don't know if you felt a similar thing or if I'm alone here, but
No. I'm
okay.
still very
I'm
worried.
I'm
Like,
still worried, but not as much.
yeah. Like, I'm glad that this show, or the MCU in general, has laid the groundwork for a multiverse to somewhat make sense. Because it
Hmm.
seems like it does now, in a way. Uh, I'm still nervous on the very, like, specific level of what will it be like for a Spider-Man movie, for
Yeah.
Tom Holland's Spider-Man as he is as a character right now, to essentially just be like, how do they make sure it's not just a money grabbing opportunity, which in a lot of ways it is, versus him developing as a character in his own universe that isn't influenced by, or that will be influenced by, other Spider-Man. I'm still very nervous about that. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know.
That worry is absolutely still here. Um, but maybe the worry of how are they going to set all this stuff up in one episode in one movie is kind of less so because now we know how, you know.
Yep.
So maybe it won't be as much of a cluster as it was sounding to be because they don't have to explain all of it. Maybe a little recap, but you know that's just Doctor Strange. He's in this movie. He's just like now I'm busy. You see the other Spider-Man out there? It's because of Loki. Don't ask me. Deal with it yourself. Then there you go. You got to explain to audiences. So
Yeah, this just makes me more excited for Doctor Strange, honestly, because I famously do not like the Doctor Strange film. I think it's bad. Well, I don't think it's bad. I think it's just meh. Um, I think his character, for me at least, vastly improved throughout Infinity War and a bit in Endgame. Um, and I'm just glad that Loki is teeing up Doctor Strange in a seemingly interesting way. So excited for that.
hell yeah. Well, Jack, do you have any other final thoughts on Loki season 1 or the finale?
Um, like I said, it's just an incredibly surprising show. I wasn't expecting anything we got out of this, and I was just pleasantly surprised by the end of it. Uh, it is in the top 10 for me as it stands right now. Um, you and I were talking about recency bias with the MCU, and that is probably the case, but I really do feel like this is one of the stronger projects for the MCU, and I feel like even in a few months, this show and WandaVision will hover around the top 10 for me because I just feel like they're really great shows. And yeah, Loki kind of nailed it on all fronts, really. I feel like I said earlier, it's probably the most consistent MCU Disney Plus show so far. Um, and it balances personal growth with Loki and as well as greater MCU ramifications. So yeah, amazing show. And you can follow me on Twitter at Fascinated Jack. What about you, Christian?
Very nice. Yep. I really enjoyed this show. I'm excited for season 2. Very excited to see the ramifications of this show in multiple upcoming MCU projects. So, very curious how slash if Ms. Marvel and Hawkeye will be addressing any of these things. Because, like, I need to see Kevin Feige's timeline of when exactly Falcon and Hawkeye take place in relation to what happens with Loki and WandaVision. Um, so curious about that. We'll see how things go in the future. I did see this also. I saw somebody say the gold and like onyx statues or marble in Kang's castle reminded them of the ship in the Eternals. So maybe we see something there too. But I'm gonna be curious about how these projects deal with the multiverse moving forward. Um, if you want to follow me on anything, Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok at Chun2D2. Excelsior can be found on youtube.com/joyclicks for the video version in the Excelsior playlist alongside the playlists for our other podcasts like Joyclicks Gamescast, Jedi Knights, Long Play Club, and every other one. But if you want the audio version, You can check it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your service of choice. Just look up Excelsior, Marvel's Avengers Podcast, or JoyClicks, and you will find Excelsior. You can sub, you can follow along for every episode. If we do bonus ones like this one, you will be able to find it in your podcast feed. Normal episode of Excelsior, talking about the Avengers game, interesting tidbits about War for Wakanda. It's not Thursday yet. Maybe we get a good look at a new MCU suit. Fingers crossed it's Thor. You can look forward to that episode hitting normally on Saturday, along with Black Widow impressions. So, yeah. Thanks for listening to this special episode of Excelsior. If you want to support us, you can check us out on any of the platforms I listed or patreon.com/joyclicks. And at the $1 and $5 tiers, you can give us your support. $5 tier will get you producer credit on this show and every show, like Chris Sakis and Aaron Easton and Charles Applin. So thank you very much. But that's it for this special episode. Until next time, Excelsior.
Excelsior.